Hello everyone, glad to be back. Today is 28th of June, now it's 11 o'clock in the morning Moscow time. I'm Levan Gudadze and this is my first update today, in which I will share all the main news that are making headlines in Russian media outlets and Russian language pages on different internet platforms. Second update will be a little bit late in the afternoon on my Patreon page. Unfortunately, I was unable to make update yesterday, so I'll do it today. And by the way, as you know, or many of you know, I do regularly make some extra content for Patreon in attempt to create or generate additional interest among members of our community towards my Patreon page, because it's a major lifeline for this project. So I will be immensely grateful if you will consider to join my Patreon. You will see a link under this video in the description box or in the pinned comment. That's been said, let's talk about news now, and let me start with a short summary of the situation on the front line in the zone of special military operation. And I will start with Kherson region. As you know, during the previous days, Ukrainian forces did manage to establish a bridgehead on the left bank of the Dnieper river, and right now Ukrainian forces are located right next to destroyed Antonovsky bridge, and despite some expectations that Russian side will force Ukrainian units to retreat on the right bank, in reality Zelensky's regime did manage to send more troops on the left bank, and according to latest reports on different sources, it's about 150 or even 200 Ukrainian soldiers that are now located on the left bank. In my reading of this situation, we are clearly observing preparation of the ground by Ukrainian side to conduct mass crossing of the Dnieper, and this will happen probably simultaneously with the offensive movements of Ukrainian forces in direction of Energodar and Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, and with second wave of Ukrainian counteroffensive in Zaporozhye sector of the front line. I did share video footage and photo footage about situation in around this bridgehead that Ukrainian forces did manage to establish. But despite all the Russian attempts to neutralize these forward units of Ukrainian forces, it seems like Russian forces are, at least for now, unable to establish control over this area, and this is because of, yet again, I'm not military expert, but in my opinion, this is happening because after Zelensky's regime destroyed Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant, first line of defense of Russian side was destroyed by flood waters, and Russian side just did not have enough time to rebuild first line of defense, and of course Ukrainian forces now using this opportunity to establish their bridgeheads on the left bank. And I guess in coming days we will see activization of Ukrainian side in this in direction of these islands in the Dnieper Delta, and probably they will also try to establish bridgehead right next to Golaya Pristan settlement on the southern side of Aleshki, where this Antonovsky bridge is located. But yet again, entire this activity of Ukrainian forces, in my understanding, is a preparation of the ground for mass crossing of the Dnieper. And by the way, even if they will manage to send hundreds and thousands of soldiers on the left bank during this mass crossing, and if they will manage to penetrate first line of defense, which is basically non-existent at this point, the Russian side just trying to rebuild from scratch this first line of defense, because after flooding, you can imagine what was done to trenches and fire points or strongholds. Even if Ukrainian forces will manage to penetrate first line of defense, second line of defense and third line of defense are basically intact, and Ukrainian forces that will cross the Dnieper will end up in trap, basically. They will end up in trap, and entire this operation will end in the very same way that first stage of Ukrainian counteroffensive did in Orekhovo direction, when Russian side basically destroyed dozens of Ukrainian units, dozens of Ukrainian armed columns, and even in Western world now, this so-called counteroffensive that Zelensky's regime conducted in Zaporozhye sector of the front have been called suicidal. So I guess very same will happen to Ukrainian forces in Kherson region if they will try and cross the Dnieper in mass. And by the way, as I just mentioned, I do expect activization of Ukrainian side, Ukrainian forces in direction of Energodar and Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. After all, not for nothing, Zelensky's regime and Western masters of this regime or Western media were talking about Zaporozhye nuclear power plant for so long. They were creating ground for plausible deniability, because if anything goes wrong with the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant during this possible attempt of Zelensky's regime to establish control over the Energodar and Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, they can blame Russia. But of course, entire world informed about this situation, and maybe Western society will, majority of Western society that are under heavy influence of Western propaganda will believe anything that they will be told, but the rest of the world will definitely do realize straight away that it was Zelensky's regime and the West that provoked disaster. Yet again, let's hope nothing will happen with Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, but unfortunately I'm quite sure that Zelensky's regime in foreseeable future, in near future, will conduct provocations in the direction of Energodar and Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, and probably even attempt to capture this area. When it comes to Zaporozhye sector of the front, it's operational pause. Still, as I said many times before, and even though in previous days main hot points were Pitikhatki and Jerebyanki area in Orekhovo sector of the front, and also Rabotino. During the previous 24 hours, there were only artillery duels between the sides and some local movements, but nothing in the large scale. So operational pause basically is holding, and I guess this will continue as long as Ukrainian side is preparing their forces to conduct mass crossing of Dnieper and attack on Energodar and Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. Once Zelensky's regime will be ready to conduct this mass crossing of the Dnieper, I guess we will see activization of Ukrainian forces in Zaporozhye sector of the front also. And by the way, little bit more activity are happening in the direction of this Remensky, so-called Remensky ledge, this bridgehead between Ugledar and Gulyai-Pole that Russia did hold, but yet again, nothing in the scale that we see in previous weeks, especially in the first stage of this so-called counteroffensive, and because it's open terrain, mainly it's open fields. Whenever Russian side does movement of Ukrainian columns, they are calling in artillery, they are calling in frontline aviation, and those columns are destroyed one by one. And by the way, probably you did see dozens of footages of destroyed Ukrainian columns, not just in Orekhovo, but also on this Remensky direction. And well, at this stage, probably I will not be wrong if I will say that Russian helicopter gunships did prove that they are one of the best in the world, especially Ki-52. So many footage of work of Ki-52 alligators in internet, and even military experts are now creating videos on internet and discussing effectiveness of Russian helicopter gunships. They did play a crucial role together with the artillery to neutralize dozens and dozens of Ukrainian columns that were conduct offensive during the entire this so-called offensive operation. And by the way, of course, Russian ground forces are there, and they are fighting and defending their positions. And of course, engineer forces that did lay down mines also did play a crucial role. Undoubtedly, many armored columns were slowed down or destroyed completely by mines. So these invisible fighters of this conflict, engineers, definitely did play also a crucial role, and will continue to play a crucial role, of course, in this whole operations. When it comes to Donetsk direction, we did have reports that Russian side did manage to conduct some successful operations in Marinka direction, but of course we are talking about local scale, and this settlement is still divided. Surprisingly, when this pro-Ukrainian map have been upgraded, and as you can see, now Russia, according to this map, do controls 70-80% of the city, but in reality Russian side controls much more. But still settlement is divided between the sides because it's ruins. Basically, it's everything is destroyed in this settlement, and fight in ruins are extremely difficult. There's too many places to hide for infantry, and that's why this fight, this battle for Marinka have been prolonged for so long. And by the way, also there were some reports that Russian side was conducting some offensive operations in direction of Pervomayskaya, but Ukrainian side are saying that it's Ukrainian forces that are conducting offensive in direction of Pervomayskaya. But this area definitely becoming a kind of hot point on the front line. This is on the southern part of Avdiivka, which is on its own hot point on the front line. And recently we did had a report that forward units of Russian side did enter southeastern part of Avdiivka, but after that reports we did not see any additional information. So I will say it's kind of operational pause that have been established in Avdiivka for now, and not that much activity from anyone's side. When it comes to, by the way, also hot point recently is Kurdyumovka. This settlement, Russian side is claiming that this settlement is under Russian control. Ukrainian side is saying that Kurdyumovka is under their control. I will say this settlement is disputed between the sides, and Kurdyumovka is located on the southern southern flank of Bakhmut itself, where Ukrainian forces also are conducting yet again local scale offensive operations. And even though nothing is happening in extraordinary scale, these constant local scale offensives from Ukrainian side do create some dangers that but as a result of constant pressure, Ukrainian forces will manage to achieve some breakthrough. And if that's the case, then Bakhmut garrison, this time Russian garrison of Bakhmut, may end up in a quite difficult situation. And same we can say about Krasnaya Gora and even Solidar. In these directions, Ukrainian forces are very active recent report that Kiev did send reinforcements in this direction. We can say that these reports were true because it seems like these fresh forces did arrive on the Bakhmut front, Bakhmut sector of the front, Bakhmut and Solidar sector of the front, and they are beginning now second wave of this local scale offensive operations. And I'm afraid if nothing will be done from Russian side to neutralize these Ukrainian reinforcements, then Bakhmut and Solidar, Krasnaya Gora may end up in a very difficult situation. And by the way, when it comes to Bakhmut Solidar sector of the front, I should mention that in Kramatorsk yesterday, Russian side did a strike on location of foreign mercenaries. There are some reports that it was high-ranking NATO officers. Some reports are saying that it was high-ranking Ukrainian and NATO officers. Some reports say it was just mercenaries, Western mercenaries that were located in that area in Kramatorsk, central part of the city. But as a result of strikes from Russian side, there were heavy casualties among these mercenaries and military personnel, but unfortunately there was some collateral damage also, and according to Ukrainian media, several people, civilians, died, and tens of civilians were injured during this strike, which is tragic, of course, and unfortunate that civilians are end up in this danger. But yet again, it's Zelensky's regime that putting these military installations in the civilian areas, and no one during the conflict can ignore any military installation, no matter it's in open terrain, in the central part of the city, or whenever these installations are, they should be destroyed. And because the Russian side is forced basically to conduct strikes on these military installations, including in cities, collateral damage do occur, and unfortunately this is probably not the last time that the collateral damage did happen. And if Ukrainian side society is angry about it, they should demand from their regime to move military installations out of civilian areas. And by the way, when it comes to this strike, I did not share on my Telegram page these videos because they are too graphic from Kramatorsk, but you can on those videos you can clearly hear English language and American English, as I understand, and on some wounded young men. Some are in military uniform, some are in civilian, but you can see soldiers or mercenaries in military uniform that have some chevrons of specific US military units, or tattoos of US military units. So I guess reports that we are receiving about the strike on Kramatorsk are correct, and mercenaries or maybe even officers of US Army were killed and wounded during this strike in Kramatorsk. Maybe this was instructors, US instructors, maybe from some other Western countries also, but maybe they were mercenaries. At this point it's hard to tell, but during the day Russian Defense Ministry will probably share with us additional information, and I will write about it on my Telegram, and I will share this additional news on my second update. When it comes to Seversk direction, it's Belogorovka, of course, main hot point constantly, and it looks like no one side has enough forces in this area to end this constant fight for this settlement and establish full control over it. There are some reports of combat in direction of Yampol and Liman, but nothing in a large scale. And of course, Kupiansk is also hot point, but still we are receiving information that it's mainly artillery duels in this area, and after some significant success of Russian side in Kupiansk direction, it's kind of operational pause now have been established again, maybe for a day, maybe for two, and we will see activization again. But at least for now, it seems like Russian forces are preparing ground for offensive in direction of Kupiansk itself, but it will take some time. This offensive probably won't happen in coming days. And Kharkov direction, Kharkov-Sumy direction, it's artillery duels between the sides, and as a result of Russian counter-battery work, significantly was reduced numbers of shellings of Belgorod region recently. But of course, Belgorod region is still not safe, and the Ukrainian forces, Zelensky's regime is trying to use any opportunity they will have to shell Belgorod region and hit deep inside Russian territory, basically. And during the previous night, Russian side did conducted yet another missile and drone strikes on military and logistical infrastructure of Zelensky's regime. And according to reports that we are receiving right now, main direction of these strikes were Zaporozhye region, in Zaporozhye city itself, and also in area of Kremenchuk, which is main logistical hub for Ukrainian side when it comes to military activity in Zaporozhye and Kherson direction. This is a quick summary of the situation on the front. Let's talk about some other news now. And by the way, I will start with this information. RIA Novosti did report that during the nighttime, Russian air defense systems were active in Melitopol. And even though at this moment we don't have additional information about how many aerial targets were destroyed and what type of aerial targets, emergency services of Zaporozhye region did report that Russian air defense systems did work in city area and all the aerial targets were destroyed. No reports about casualties on the ground or any serious damage. Let me continue. And also RIA Novosti did reporting about Putin's speech that was addressed to Russian society, of course, and he made this speech in Kremlin yesterday afternoon, and staff of FSB, Ministry of Internal Affairs, and Federal Service of Security was also presented during this speech, and also, of course, defense staff of defense ministry. Putin once again did mention how significant it is that during crisis that we see in previous weekend, Russian society was united, state institutions did conduct themselves appropriately, and basically Putin once again thanked society and members of state institutions. And if you are interested in more details of his speech, you can see it on my Telegram page, because almost simultaneously President of Belarus, Lukashenko, was giving press conference. He was speaking with journalists, and he also made quite a few very interesting statements. And you can also read about Lukashenko's statements on my Telegram. It will take just too long if I will start now talking about each point that they did make during the statements. But once again, Putin did highlight importance of unity in society and proper work of state institutions. Let me continue now. And by the way, That's quite interesting. Almost all Russian media outlets and all Russian pages on internet that I see did give separate news bulletin or separate article or post to fact that Defense Minister Shoigu was also presented during Putin's speech in Kremlin. And this fact itself, that media outlets did find it necessary to write about Shoigu's presence during Putin's speech, probably are indicator that there are some expectations in society here in Russia, that some changes will be done in leadership of Defense Ministry. But yet again, as I said quite a few times before, Putin does not make decisions based on emotions or under pressure. He always takes time and before decisions, especially, of course, when it comes to significant decisions. And that's why I said that even if some changes were planned in Defense Ministry or are planned in Defense Ministry, because of this recent activity of PMC Wagner during the previous weekend, these changes will be announced no earlier than at least after a couple of weeks or maybe even a couple of months. But by the way, even though some expectations in society clearly are, and as I said, fact itself that media did reported that Shoigu was presented during Putin's speech probably indicates that there are some expectations in society. Despite these expectations, possible expectations, changes in Defense Ministry will occur at least after a few weeks, no earlier than that, but maybe even after a few months, if any changes will take place at all. Because who knows what Putin's plans are really. And he may say, you know what, it's it may not be greatest idea to change leadership of Defense Ministry during the special military operation. And he may, even if Shoigu will try to resign, Putin may say, you know what, no, you can resign out special military operation, but now you have to stay and work. I mean, yet again, who knows? Yes, Kremlin probably are listening to society's expectations, but same time, these decisions, as I said, man, decisions are made not on emotions and not under pressure. All decisions have to be made by scrupulous calculations and analysis of situation. And yeah, that's why I'm saying, if there will be any changes, only in a couple of weeks or a couple of months, or there may be no changes at all. Let me continue now, and this is TASS News Agency's report, according to which Russian Defense Ministry did reported that preparation has begun to transfer all the heavy military equipment from PMC Wagner to Russian Defense Ministry. And of course, we are talking about tanks, we are talking about armored personnel carriers, armored vehicles, even air defense systems. PMC Wagner has quite a lot of military ammunition and equipment, really. And it seems like this equipment won't be transferred in Belarus. It will end up in hands of Russian Defense Ministry. But yet again, if that's the case, then I guess it will be Belarus that will provide PMC Wagner units with weaponry. Because otherwise, what is the point to have PMC fighters in Belarus? They cannot do nothing without weapons, isn't it? Let me continue. And by the way, this is also interesting. Criminal case was suspended against on the fact of armed rebellion, as it was articulated during the negotiations with the leadership of PMC Wagner. So I guess there are no criminal charges now against any member of PMC, including head of PMC, Yevgeny Prigozhin. And this information coming from Russian FSB, so it's official. Next information is about Rosguardia. RIA Novosti is reporting that after this crisis during the previous weekend, Moscow is considering to arm Rosguardia with heavy military weaponry, including tanks. So I guess in fairly short amount of time, Rosguardia will become much more capable, because they will have much more weaponry in the disposal. It was, I mean, quite some time ago, Rosguardia did have. Rosguardia was called internal forces, and they did have had tanks and all the military equipment that army has. But then there were some changes. Rosguardia was created, and Moscow probably decided that Rosguardia don't really need tanks or heavy weapons like armored personnel carriers, flamethrowers, MLRS systems, attack aviation. But after these developments during the previous weekend, probably it became clear that Rosguardia, to be able to conduct successful operations against seriously armed opponent, does need heavy military equipment. And I guess we will see transformation of Rosguardia in fairly short amount of time in much more armed and much more capable military institution. Let me continue. RIA Novosti is reporting that in UN, let me translate this to be precise. It will take just a second. So more than 40 detainees in Ukraine prisons have told the UN that they were tortured and sexually abused, mostly in secret detention centers, according to report by Office of UN's High Commissioner for Human Rights. So basically UN's High Commission for Human Rights is accusing Zelensky's regime, accusing Kiev of torture and well, this is surprising. This is surprising because we did not see criticism of Zelensky's regime for international institutions that often. But well, we all knew that Zelensky's regime was torturing and killing not just civilians, not just POWs, but also civilians, including civilians that were just Russian speakers, not even support of anybody, but just Russian speakers. We all knew this, but it's something new when this has been said from stage of UN, because world is listening. And this is absolutely true. I'm surprised that UN personnel was able to even spoke with prisoners of Zelensky's regime or hostages of Zelensky's regime. You cannot even call prisoners those people. They are hostages of Zelensky's terrorist and Nazi regime. That's what it really is. And well, I hope more and more international organizations will pay attention to criminal activity of Zelensky's regime, not just UN. But hopefully some other, not just international organizations, but other states will also raise their voice against Zelensky's regime, because this regime should be neutralized. This regime, this horrible, inhuman regime should be neutralized. Let me continue. And by the way, as I said yesterday, President of Belarus also had did made quite statements during his press conference, and one of the topics was nuclear weapons and the PMC Wagner and Lukashenko. According to information that I see on Russian media and Telegram pages, Lukashenko did confirm that nuclear weapons, Russian tactical nukes, are already in Belarus, and PMC Wagner units won't be involved in securing these areas where nuclear weapons have been stored. And when it comes to PMC Wagner itself, Lukashenko did also made statements about PMC fighters, and he said that Wagner do have significant experience, and they can be very handful to train not Ukrainian but Belarusian armed forces. It was expected, I did say quite a few times, that one of the main tasks for Wagner probably will be to train Belarusian military personnel, and yes, Lukashenko basically did confirm exactly this. But in my opinion, main task for Wagnerites will be to conduct counter-terrorist operations if Poland or Baltic states will send in Belarus sabotage groups that have been trained, for example, in Poland for quite a long time now. But yet again, because of experience, of course, PMC Wagner can be very helpful to train Belarusian military personnel. And if you want to read some more or learn some more about Lukashenko's statement, as I said, you can see it on my Telegram page. Link is in the description to my Telegram, or in pinned comment. This is RT, by the way, and once again, let me check how long is this video. 37 minutes. Wow. Okay, I will just go through headlines, and this article, for example, is about RT's article is about statements of Sergei Karaganov, a Russian professor and well-respected public figure, who did recently said in his article that Russia may force to use nuclear weapons, basically. And according to Karaganov, Russia is already forced and already are in situation when nuclear weapons not just can be used but also should be used. And these statements of Karaganov did cause some discussion in Russia, and some are in support of Karaganov because they are saying if Russia don't demonstrate enough force now, there will be much more casualties later on. That's one argument of experts and just people that are in support of Sergei Karaganov. But in opposite side also are experts that are saying that any use of extreme force, such extreme measures, can provoke even bigger disaster. And by the way, as you can see, this discussion in society still continues, and it's active. And me personally, I'm not surprised, because I was saying for how long now that constant escalation from the Western elites have to be stopped Otherwise, Moscow one day may end up in situation, or Moscow may find itself in situation when there will be no other way out than use of extreme force. And unfortunately, we are, in my understanding, we are closing in to that point. And it will take probably miracle to somehow avoid the scenario in which nuclear weapons will be used. And you don't have to be a professor, or you don't have to be, I don't know, genius to realize this, because we all see news, we all analyze information that is happening, and we all understand that this constant escalation from the West eventually will push Russia to act accordingly. And yeah, eventually we may end up seeing use of extreme force, which will be unfortunate, of course. But yet again, supporters of Karaganov do say that it's logic that was behind the nuclear strikes on Japan by US. It's almost the same logic supporters of Sergei Karaganov do have now, as I understand, because they are saying if Russia won't use nuclear weapons now, which will of course be costly, will be devastating for receiving side, but if Russia won't use these nukes now, later on there will be more casualties, even greater disaster. That's how they try to justify use of nukes. But yet again, opposite side is saying that you can use nukes and it may provoke similar reaction from NATO, for example. NATO may use nukes, and then we are in full-scale nuclear exchange, and the world is over. So which side is right? I mean, you tell me. I don't even want to hear anything about usage of nuclear weapons. It's just too extreme and too dangerous. But yet again, I do understand that they are significant danger that constant escalation from the Western elites eventually will force Russia to begin using extreme force. Man, it's just logical, isn't it? I mean, as I said, you don't have to be genius to understand this, to see this picture. So yes, I mean, this topic is openly discussed in Russia, and as I said, man, Karaganov is not a person who is known for some extravagant statements. No, he's a well-respected intellectual in Russia, and that's why this discussion have been even taking place in open sources, because of his weight as an intellectual. Let me continue now, and RIA Novosti is reporting that Shoigu, Russian Defense Ministry, had a meeting with the Defense Minister of Cuba yesterday late afternoon. I did share information about it also on my Telegram, and by the way, recently we all see significant improvement of not just relationships between Russia and Cuba was always good, but we are recently seeing intensification of relationships between the sides, and this visit of Defense Minister of Cuba to Russia is definitely a step in further improvement of ties between the sides. And this is very interesting, because this visit is happening during the time when in US actively has been discussed this topic of Chinese military bases on Cuba. Of course, Cuba and China are denying that they had any talks about military bases, but even if they have, it's their own business, isn't it? US now are in situation that Russia was quite some time ago, when Moscow was warning NATO, just don't move your military installations closer to our borders. Just don't do it, because we will be forced to react. And now Washington are definitely in the very same situation, and probably there are chances that many US citizens will understood now, will begin to understand. US citizens that are blind by this Western propaganda, but still maybe there are some chance that citizens of US that are under influence of Western propaganda will start asking questions. I mean, if we are now worrying about Chinese military bases on Cuba, then why we are denying in very same rights Moscow, when Moscow was worrying or opposing establishment of NATO bases next to their borders, you know? But yet again, of course, details of talks between two ministers are not open, and who knows, maybe we will see not just Chinese military base in Cuba, but also Russian. That's a possibility also, because the Soviet Union did have bases on Cuba, and Cuba didn't ask to remove those bases. It was Moscow that decided to, after Soviet Union collapsed, it's Moscow's decision that to remove those bases. And maybe in foreseeable future we will see, if this constant escalation is, if Western elites will continue this constant escalation with Russia and also with China, by the way, then it's almost inevitable at this stage that we will see some military bases of China and Russia on Cuba. It's Western elites that provoking this, isn't it? It's a simple truth. But it's Western elites and their constant aggressive behavior on the world stage that are pushing states like Russia and China to, you know, act accordingly. Let me continue now. And yes, by the way, this is interesting. 47 minutes. Wow, maybe I will skip this news because, or just headlines. So, Foreign Minister of Ukraine Kuleba did said that Ukraine was not invited on the NATO summit that will take place in Vilnius this summer. And well, Kuleba said that the Ukrainian side was invited to participate in Council of NATO, but not in NATO summit itself, which is quite understandable. Ukraine is not NATO member, so why should Ukraine be presented on NATO summit? But nowadays, anything is possible. I mean, Western elites do whatever they want, and you know, they could invite Ukraine, but probably at least some part of the so-called Western elites are fed up with Ukraine, and that's why Kiev was not invited. By the way, Trump did, RIA Novosti is reporting that Trump did made a statement about Biden, and he said that Biden is controlled by China, because despite these informations that China is planning to establish military base on Cuba, Biden does nothing. Well, I don't think this is exactly the indicator that Biden is controlled by China, because who needs to control Biden, man? Decisions in US are made not by Biden. We all know this perfectly well. Decisions are made by some people in shadow, for sure. But when it comes to Biden itself, there are so many informations that Biden clan or Biden's family had some business and corrupt ties with Ukraine, with China, by the way, some Chinese companies. So I mean, anything is possible. Maybe sometime in the past Biden had something to do with China when he was able to make some decisions like 10 years ago, 15 years ago. But now Biden does not make any decision whatsoever. He is just signing papers that he is given. So that's why I think these statements of Trump is just for internal use only, to mass his supporters. Let me continue. RIA Novosti is reporting that Pentagon already allocated to Zelensky's regime military weapons for $41.2 billion. So Zelensky's regime, just as weapons, did receive from Pentagon for ammunition, armored personnel carriers, and the rest of it for $41.2 billion, which is, and this is since the beginning special military operation. Many European states don't have a budget this much money in defense budget, but Zelensky's regime did receive it, well, in addition, Zelensky's regime did receive some 100 billion in cash and some other stuff. So when you consider how much money was allocated towards Zelensky's regime during last 12 to 18 months, 40 billion, 41 billion don't really looks that much no more, because overall it's up to 200 billion that was one way or another allocated to Zelensky's regime and entire this anti-Russian operation of Western secret services and Western elites. RIA Novosti is reporting that according to some InfoBricks article in InfoBricks, Poland is striking its NATO ally, and this article is about deteriorating relationships between Poland and Germany. And as you know, Poland is demanding from Germany about $1 trillion or euros for damages that was done during the Second World War by Nazi Germany, and well, Poland now definitely are in position, especially because of support of Washington and London, to push around Germany like it wants. Which is surprising. I do understand that, because after all, Germany is still major economy in Europe, despite all the problems. But as a fact of the matter, when it comes to political will and even military, Poland is probably in much better place than Germany is, because Polish elites at least know what they want, or at least it seems like. When German elites and Polish elites are acting accordingly. When German elites, I mean, they can say one day one stuff, second day another, next day something else. I mean, it's total chaos. I mean, from outside at least, that's how it seems. That German government is total mess. And Germany, by the way, don't really have any capable army whatsoever. This is also true. So that's why I guess Poland, the Polish elites, feel like they are in position now to push around Germany, and if they are able to do it with Germany, or they will definitely do it with some other neighbors. But this is a long-term perspective. I mean, of course, in near future we will not see any higher level of confrontation on political or any other level between Poland and Germany, but relationships definitely are deteriorating between the countries. That's absolutely true. And by the way, next information is from RT about exactly about Germany and recession in Germany. It seems like it's the second month in a row German economy is in recession, in minus, and well, it's quite possible that Germany will end up in recession, which won't be a surprise really, because as I said, current government of Germany is a total mess, and it seems like they are intentionally damaging German economy, intentionally damaging interests of German society, and it's hard to understand what and how these people even end up in being German government, and then what they want. I mean, as I said, man, you cannot take seriously Scholz, Baerbock, and this type of people. You know, if it was up to me, I will don't trust Scholz and Baerbock even to clean streets, for God's sake, because they are incapable to do anything properly. But in case of Germany, these people are top officials, high-ranking officials. So I'm not surprised that Germany's economy is experiencing some difficulties. That's unfortunate for ordinary Germans, but by the way, you have to deal with your elites, otherwise things will go from bad to worse, and very quickly. Ria Novosti is also reporting that Russian Central Bank did make quite optimistic a forecast for Russian GDP. Optimistic in terms of central bank, because central bank is usually always conservative. And according to this article in Ria Novosti, Central Bank of Russia expecting that in 2023 Russian GDP may increase up to 2%, which is less than some other forecasts that we see previously from Sber leader, head of Sberbank, for example, or some other financial experts. But still, 2% is quite good result if we take into account all that pressure that Russia is under because of these Western sanctions. And by the way, this is going to be last news for today's update, which is, I mean, and information is quite interesting, really, because Russia is to legalize cryptocurrencies, and in State Duma is working on these matters, and it seems like Moscow now thinks to not just legalize cryptocurrencies, but also to use cryptocurrency in at least partially in foreign trade, because and this is because many companies all around the world do experience some difficulties to deal with Russian banking system, and when it comes to cryptocurrencies, I mean, they will be able to freely conduct trade and pay for goods and services without, you know, some extra stress, let's say this way. So, you know, this is quite interesting news. Maybe in a fairly short amount of time we will see significant changes in Russian law, in Russian government's attitude towards cryptocurrencies, and well, this is good, really. Excuse me. I guess this is good step, because cryptocurrency is here to stay, and I don't think it's very clever to ignore this fact. So if cryptocurrencies can be used to benefit Russia, then why not? And Russian society, why not? Let's do it. So this is it for now. I hope you will find this update interesting, and if so, please hit that like button. It's an hour again. Oh, sometimes I do manage to make updates like 30-35 minutes, and sometimes it's hour. I don't know what am I doing wrong, man. Why I cannot make update like 30-35 minutes. But anyway, I hope you will find this video interesting, and if so, please hit that like button, leave some commentary about any topic you like, and if you can, please share links to my videos or my channel with your friends on Facebook, Twitter, Telegram, or any other platform that you are active on. And if you think this channel is interesting, useful, informative, and deserves to exist, please consider to support with small donations through PayPal, buy me a coffee, or by subscribing to my Patreon page. You will see links under this video in the description box. This is it for now. Have a great day and take care.